Hello and welcome back to the Step Through. This is season 2, episode 3. Evan, can you believe it? We've already made it to 18 episodes of this podcast. It's pretty cool. How did you enjoy this last week in the W?
Chaos. I really like the chaos. How about you?
I think my favorite moment was when DEWANNA BONNER had to remind Aisha Sheppard to take her warm-up shirt off before she entered the game against Connecticut.
You know what I really liked about that is that I don't know if people paid attention in the first game, but at some point, Aisha Sheppard, I'm not saying she tried to sub herself in, but she was at the scorer's table. I don't think the coaches had noticed, and she was subbing into the game. She didn't have her warm up on that time, but she was going into the game, and then Becky screams from her seat, and then the next thing you see is her scooting back to the end of the bench, and then Kia Stokes coming in. So I think that's why she was so excited that she didn't even have her warm up off. In that,
Yeah, it was great. Like a bunch of people are trying to get her attention, and finally DEWANNA has to like tap her on the arm, and Becky's just cracking up as she delivers the shirt back. It's such fun stuff. I mean, Asia just truly doing the Lord's work of trying to get more wings in the game for the Aces, because I mean, we're going to get to it later, but there's a lot of bigs taking the court all the time. And I mean, I thought we were done with Bill. Like, I thought this was over. Immobile bigs are not what I want to see when I watch the Las Vegas Aces. But again, we will get to that. But first things first, you know, I had wanted to ask you last week, like when I needed to start watching the Liberty. Like, is it okay that I'm no longer watching the Liberty? And I ended up watching one game this week of the New York Liberty. It happened to be their win against the Indiana Fever. But at the risk of repeating a mistake from last season, I will refrain from reading anything into a New York Liberty game against the Indiana Fever. So again, just if you watch the show, let me know in a couple weeks whenever I need to start watching Liberty, because I don't see the need yet. Yeah. Best wishes to Benisha Laney, by the way. I hope she comes back as good as ever.
Yeah, I mean, what are they when they are lacking all that, right?
Yeah.
So, sad stuff, but yeah.
If you judge Sabreena Ionescu by her games against the Fever,
it's the greatest player.
W25 immediately.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about New York. I apologize. They and Minnesota are currently on my I will avoid them at by all means necessary list.
Somebody asked me what the answer to their struggles were, and I said if the league will allow, you can just put the two teams together, and then now you're cooking with.
Minnesota solves its point guard issues, and New York solves its everything but the point guard issues.
Yes.
So, win-win. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Han and Sylvia Fowles playing together might just be reason enough to have two big centers playing the court together.
Yeah, and they could have played against that Aces front court from Thursday.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They would have obliterated that Aces front court from Thursday. Yeah. Han is something interesting, actually. Like, I get Boban vibes from watching her, because defensively, I'm not entirely sure how she'll hold up, but you get the ball to her with deep post position, and her touch is really good around the basket. She's finishing a lot. I'm intrigued. There's something there. I do think it's funny that they've realized that Han has this, potential for them at the same time that they spent their free agent resources signing Stephanie Dolson, and still have Natasha Howard and are waiting on Kylie Shook next year. So that's a thing that the Liberty will have to deal with.
I think what's nice about the Liberty is that they have decided, like, no matter who wins the WNBA finals, like, they're going to sign a center from
that team,
that squad. Yeah. So it's a good game plan.
So Kia Stokes, come on back to New York. What about you, Evan? Anything stick out to you this week?
Well, I don't want to say not really, but not really.
You can always just team me up again. I have more things to talk about. I just wanted to share the co-hosting duties with you for a moment.
Right. I've watched so much Sun at this point for our games of the week. It's technically speaking, it's 4 straight games.
Yep.
Over 2 weeks for the Sun. And that one day I tried to just casually watch the Sun against the Mystics. I've watched a lot of the Sun. I have a lot of front court thoughts. Yeah. So what do you have?
Well, I'm enjoying watching the LA Sparks, which I know, shocker. But Brittany Sykes, sort of the flavor of the week. Christy Tolliver remains unavailable for the Los Angeles Sparks, which at a certain point I'm going to start to read into, but it has only been 1 week since the end of the NBA season. So it's fine that she has yet to report to WNBA training camp. I realize that players who play internationally seemingly have shorter turnarounds than Christy did, and she's been on the same time zone, but you do what you got to do. In her absence, we've gotten some Brittany Sykes point guard stuff, which basically just means that Brittany gets the ball with like a spaced floor around her, and given her athleticism and her ability to get to the cup, like she is a bully getting to the basket sometimes. And her drives against the Dallas Wings, who, I mean, I know I said I wasn't going to read too much in the Sparks win against the Mercury a week ago when you and I spoke, but the Wings are like a competent defense. So for her to get to the basket against the Wings was pretty damn entertaining. And I just like that there are lots of different scoring options on the Sparks, which something you and I could not have said when we did this show a year ago.
I don't know what you mean. I would never. Yeah, no. I mean, the backcourt last year, I believe it was Sykes and Wheeler.
Sykes and Wheeler. It was Tolliver and Wheeler a lot too.
Yes. I love Christy Tolliver as much as, but no, Sykes and Wheeler is the.
I do appreciate having backcourt players who are taller than 5'6". Like, it's nice, I mean, not to say that you can't be a capable WNBA guard at 5'6", because I wrote a little bit about Ari McDonald's and Dana Evans and even Jordan Canada's 5'6", but like just a couple extra inches makes a world of difference.
Yeah, generally I tend to agree, but I mean, the reason I brought them up is because the chaos, right? Defensively, they just wreak havoc on teams. So yeah, I haven't seen any of that yet from really any team since the level of ferocity defensively from just the backcourt, and then just like a steep drop off everywhere else. Just yeah. So that Brittany Sykes, and then also this is I'm becoming dangerously close to just like a full on Katie Lou Samuelson stan. I kind of love everything she does on the court, like spaces, just been raining threes since she got to the Sparks. Then just like the driving off of closeouts too. She's made a couple nice defensive stops near the end of games against Dallas. She was the only Spark, like front court players included, who could stand up to Izzy Harrison, which I thought was really interesting. Just her versatility at multiple different positions. I'm very much enjoying the Lou experiences. Sparks have obviously been in the Samuelson business for a very long time, but it's nice to have the baby sister here, and she's crushing it. It's fun to watch. Yeah, I think we talked about this before the season. She was going to be maybe the only person capable of spacing the floor.
Correct.
And I mean,
thankfully Lexi Brown exists as well.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. Anything else on the season? So on the last week, I guess.
Like you, I've also spent a lot of time watching the Connecticut Sun. For our games of the week, and just because I thoroughly enjoy watching Bri Jones play basketball, as our good friend Mark Schindler noted on his piece on WNBA.com this week. But I'm good to get into our game of the week if you are.
Sure. Yeah. All-Star.
Oh,
we finally have that.
Thanks,
so,
Kathy.
Yeah.
Just another sign that she listens to this show.
Yeah. But in case you can't find the link, I mean, by the time this episode comes out, the link will hopefully be easier to find, but I'll have the link below.
It's just vote.WNBA.com.
Yeah, but
you won't very hard to find on the WNBA homepage. So just vote.WNBA.com.
There we go.
Yeah. See if you can get 5 aces onto your starters.
I can, and I will. All right.
It's trickier than you might think, though.
Yeah, you have to scroll all the way down,
or you can just
type the search. But yeah, so our games of the week were Sun Aces. Thursday the 2nd. I'm forgetting the date.
Correct, and Tuesday the 31st.
Yes, thank you. Just getting this out of the way early. If you have the same 2 teams playing at the same venue in back-to-back games, change the jerseys, please. As I'm going to edit this podcast and then do the video stuff, it's always easier when I can look at it and say, oh yeah, those are the jerseys from the Thursday game. No such luck here. So yeah.
And the thing is, like, Connecticut and Vegas have a really good set of 3 jerseys apiece. Like, they could have, made this more visually appealing. Like, I love all of Connecticut's jerseys. The blue and orange are really good. I mean, Vegas, like red, black, white. I mean, there are certain teams obviously where I would, heavily root against them using the entirety of their jersey combinations. But now these are 2 where they really missed out on just like a visual aesthetic opportunity here, and then also making your life significantly more difficult. So I apologize for that, Evin.
Yeah, just a quick aside. Do you remember the Commissioner's Cup final when
Oh my God.
you were talking about which jerseys are they going to wear? Oh yeah, the only ones that would look really bad would be if they paired these 2. Yeah, that was a monstrosity. Anyway.
Yeah, as was that game, but hey, what are you going to do? At least we got the terrifying visual of the animatronic human beings, on Amazon Prime.
For the sake of everybody, I'm not gonna put those
Not gonna
clips
link
here.
to that.
Yeah. But yeah.
You had the opportunity to watch the first game, right?
Yes.
And really dig into that. So let's see what you got.
So we were going to do Storm Aces week 1. As anytime there's a Storm Aces game, it has to be game of the week.
Has to be a step through game of the week.
Yeah. But we weren't able to record that very first week, so we had to hold off on any Aces like full game analysis. This one, I learned a lot about the Aces. I've been throwing a bunch, but I believe they moved to 9-1 after. Yeah. So this was after they won the Tuesday game. Spoiler. After they won the Tuesday game, it was the best 10-game start by a first-year head coach.
Yep.
Best start in franchise history.
I believe a 7-game win streak for the Aces too.
Yeah. And what it was a dominant showing from their first 5, their 5 all-stars, and the drop off after that was steep. It was steep. So yeah, the other big things were Jonquel Jones, 4 shot attempts. She passed up a number of open looks, not necessarily just passing them up for passing them up's sake. The Aces defense, they threw out a lot of different looks. So I wouldn't necessarily say that Jonquel just like wasn't shooting or wasn't being aggressive. She was making the right plays, but yeah, the Aces were just all over the place. So I guess the best place to start is with zone. My biggest thing with the Aces is that Becky Hammond is, 1, interested in keeping their best players out there for as long as possible, and 2, unless you're overly aggressive, it limits foul trouble. So, you're keeping your 5 best players out there for as long as possible. They switch things up around a lot. Before I jump into the game against the Sun, I do want to point out that they even threw out a box and 1 against the Chicago Sky. I asked Em Adler, and, if you know anything about Em Adler, if there's something she hasn't seen in other games, then that means it probably hasn't happened because she watches every game like a true sicko. So I asked her if she had noticed them playing box and 1 ever outside of the Sky game. She said no. So I'm taking that as it hasn't happened.
Gospel, yes.
Yeah. So in the Sky game, they box and 1 Candace Parker. Dearica Hamby was just chasing her around. And I mean, I think the key to that is when you're going zone 2-3 or 3-2, which, the Aces throw out, a tall player who has maximum basketball IQ, who can make any pass imaginable from just about anywhere, is basically kryptonite to most zones. So throwing a box and 1 at Candace Parker to take her out of it. And, it was with roughly a bench lineup. It was a way to limit like that bench lineup. So yeah, really interesting. But what it told me was that what the Aces want to do are dictate terms. So that's why you go 2-3, 3-2, all of that stuff, is because you want to be the one who gets to say, hey, if you want to take these shots, take these shots. If you want to work the clock and, make the zone shift and stuff like that, you can do that. But there are only so many shots you're going to give up. And for the most part, you're kind of betting on the fact that you're daring a team to beat you in very specific ways. And if they can't do that, then you win the game. Jackie Young out at top in that 2-3, active hands in the passing lane. She's able to pick off this Dejanay Carrington pass and then, is able to go the other way. And then as the Sun come back down, they're still in it, obviously, because it works. But if you'll notice, it's just you're trying to get the ball into that top, that middle, right about that nail area. And Alyssa Thomas catches the ball here and she lets fly a floater, which, professional athletes have seen zone before, right? But what they think is they can hit this shot because Alyssa Thomas, you'll take that shot most of the time. But early shot clock against the zone, that's exactly what they want you to be doing. When Kia Stokes was in the game in the second quarter, it was Chelsea out top with Kelsey and Hamby and Asia out at the wings, and then Kia in the middle. They were able to get this Tisha Heidemann middle penetration, but it's a sea of arms, and Chelsea just like powers the ball away from her, and then they're going the other way. And that's what it is it's not necessarily that you can't beat a zone, is that most of the time they're saying, yeah, if you want Courtney Williams to take this corner 3 over Dearica Hamby's outstretched arms, cool. If you make it, great. But this is how we're going to play, and this is how we're going to keep our best players on the floor. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the work that Dearica Hamby does in that box and one, because it is not easy to keep Candace out of action in general, especially while Candace is trying to be involved. And that's just such a luxury for the Vegas Aces that like you don't have to put A'ja Wilson on the opposing team's best post player. Like Hamby is that option, whether it's a perimeter player, honestly, or a post player. And Dearica works.
If you had told me just watching this game that A'ja Wilson only had 2 blocks recorded in the stat sheet, I would be surprised because the way she got her hand on up on so many contests, especially at the rim, she was able to wall up. I don't necessarily know that I ever exclusively thought of A'ja Wilson as like a backline defender before this season, but well, I mean, understandably so because she was never like
she was
tallest.
Not the back.
Yeah, but really putting her there and putting trust in the fact that like, she can be that is they've unlocked quite a number of things, this Aces group. And if you're talking about Dearica Hamby, the luxury of having a player like her, this Swiss Army knife type player where she's playing at the top of this 3-2 zone and you bait DEWANNA Bonner into taking this contested mid-range jumper. And then
do you really have to bait DEWANNA into taking that?
That's true. Yeah. That's very true. But I mean, Hamby is, the weakest 3-point shooter of the bunch, but she more than makes up for it in, just about everything. Like, I'm really going to push for a Dearica Hamby all-star berth.
Did you vote for her, Evin?
No, I did not. I did not. It's, in my defense, the way they lined up all of the front court players, I was baited.
You basically already have 6 selected by the time you look at the first 2 rows.
Yeah,
they're definitely biasing you into picking certain players. I would agree.
I mean, nobody has as many 6th Player of the Year awards, so keep that in mind, voters. But yeah, their 3-2 was also interesting. The 3-2, has a little more length out top. One of the other times I want to talk about that they deployed it was with Jackie Young out at the top. And I didn't listen to the announcers very much this game, but they talked about the Aces junking it up in the first game. What I like about that is that you don't necessarily want to give away your hand. We see it all the time in college games, right? Where if it's the first of 2 matchups, why not sit in a zone for a whole bunch of it? And then in the second matchup, you can really show them what you got. But a 3-2 zone, like we're seeing here, the ball gets kicked by Chelsea Gray, and then it's a sideline out of bounds. And one of my favorite things that I've noticed this season about the Aces is that on sideline out of bounds plays, or even baseline out of bounds plays, they'll go into a 2-3 zone. And I heard Mike Thibault and Eric Thibault talking about this on Slappin Glass, which is a terrific podcast. I'll link to that below. They talked previously about the W isn't necessarily a baseline out of bounds league. So you prepare for it every so often, and you worry about certain quick hitters being run, things you want to take away, but you don't really spend a lot of time in shoot around, in walkthroughs on it. So the fact that the aces just go, okay, this isn't really going to beat us. We get to dictate. I mean, that's what a zone is, right? We are the ones who are going to make them take specific shots in specific spots. So you don't have to spend any more time on that. You just know out of bounds, we're going zone. If we have to go man, we'll go man. And that's an easy adjustment to make on the fly. But you're not spending all this time like scouting, like, okay, this team runs this flex action, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, as you'll see here, the ball is whipping around. Eventually, yeah, they give up this Natisha Heidemann 3, but it's not the end of the world because you're the one who's saying this is how we'll lose. But to their credit, like I said, you're going to hear it a lot, and I apologize, but dictating action. Here, this one, what you're going to see is something that they didn't do very much in the first half. They come right out. Asia is defending Jonquel here. Chelsea Gray is guarding Courtney. And then suddenly, for the first time all game, they're in an all-out blitz. Forces Courtney to, I think she ends up calling a timeout, even though it's close to a jump ball. But yeah, these random double teams. I can think of another time in the third quarter, DEWANNA enters the ball to Bri Jones. And then Kelsey comes all the way from the opposite corner to double. And what they're basically saying is, we're going to force you to make this skip or pass back to DEWANNA, who threw that entry. So when we force you to make that skip, it's going to be Alyssa Thomas catching the ball behind the 3-point line. Are you scared of that? No, not really. The next best play she can make is a quick swing to Courtney, baiting Courtney Williams, who, I mean, similar to DEWANNA Bonner, tough shot maker for sure. But what you're saying is you're going to make these shots, cool. And she didn't make enough.
Yeah, the double thing happened a lot in the third quarter of the second game. Except I noticed that the doubles were coming closer to the baseline. So that was like an even harder trap because you're using the baseline as that third defender. Then obviously they weren't able to like be as aggressive defensively later in the game once Jackie Young got hurt. But it is interesting to see Vegas navigate between all of these different things with their defensive personnel because, I mean, their defensive personnel is really, really good. Like Dearica Hamby, like you said, can just basically do anything you want her to. She could be the backline defense if you wanted, if like Aisha Wilson is, propped up high on a possession. But it is interesting that like Carolyn Peck kept mentioning this on the second broadcast, that the team that wins in a 2-game set is kind of at a disadvantage almost in the second game because like it's hard to proactively make adjustments sometimes after you've already won. And you could tell that the aces were content putting Connecticut in a position where Courtney Williams just had to take these mid-rangers and jumpers. And it worked in game 1 and it didn't really work in game 2 because her and DEWANNA were just like unconscionably hot in the first half, even though Courtney Williams, God forbid, should just actually take an open 3 instead of dribbling into a 2 ever so often. But that's the kind of thing that like if Vegas had lost the first game, you might have seen them adjust into taking away Courtney, her, scoring opportunities in that second game. But because it had worked the first time around, they just weren't forced to be in that position.
Yes. Also, big adjustment for the Sun in game 2, the return of their head coach.
Yeah, that was a big one. Big one.
Certainly helps, right? I won't talk as much about game 2, but if you're gonna 37 points in the first quarter, is that right?
Yeah, 37 in the first quarter.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I mean,
we just talked about Vegas last week putting up franchise records of 38 and 39 in consecutive games, and then Connecticut was like, "Well, watch this." Against much better defense too.
Yeah. There are no sparks.
Hey.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'll hold off on the offensive breakdown stuff just because. But one thing I would like to get into, and I have a clip from the Sky game, which the Sky game was very interesting to me to watch in preparation for the Sun game because the Sky at times do very similar things to the Sun. They're a hard hedging team, which again, if Em Adler says it, it's gospel. But yeah, most teams in the W are hard hedging teams, but the Sky and Sun have the personnel and the foot speed to be able to make life very difficult. And they'll occasionally throw in a blitz here and there, and that will kill you. But what the Aces did was they started, using these guard to guard screens, which most teams, especially in the W, do a 2-through-4 switching. But how are you going to handle that 1-2 or 1-3 pick and roll? However you're going to handle it, the aces don't care because they're going to ghost it. So here you watch Plum get a ghost. If you don't know what a ghost is, it's effectively if you know what a slip is the screener doesn't set the screen and then goes to the basket without setting screen. That's a slip. A ghost, especially how I use it, is setting that screen, slipping out, but then going out to the perimeter instead of to the basket. So guard to guard ghosts, and that just creates all sorts of room for hard driving, very capable guards like Plum, Gray, Jackie to attack. Here they get Hamby corner 3 because help sucks in. But against the Sun, here Jackie's handling, Plum ghosts it. Yvonne Anderson has the unenviable task of having to body up Jackie, and then Jackie draws free throws. So yeah, just really tough stuff.
I will say the biggest difference about Kurt Miller returning for the second game is that man does not mess around with his rotations. And you did not see Yvonne Anderson in the second game, other than a very small stretch at the end of the second quarter. And that's no disrespect to Yvonne Anderson. It's just in a game against the Aces, caliber of a team that they are, Kurt Miller is very comfortable with his 7-player rotation and nothing beyond that.
Yeah, and it's also, you've seen what happens with like a deeper rotation. Why not limit it? Why not see where you can go from there? Mm-hmm. There was actually one sequence where Yvonne Anderson was guarding Chelsea Gray, a side pick and roll. She gets over the screen well, has her hands straight up to contest. Chelsea, 2 seconds left on the shot clock, is leaning in. Air ball by Chelsea, which, this game, and I think your game too, Chelsea was just, she was a monster. When it came to timely buckets, she just found a way. I'm thinking of one in the first game where it was the first quarter, end of shot clock, turnaround, fade away. But yeah, forces an air ball here, which is really, really great. And then, so the Aces are in 2-3 zone. DeJounette takes an early 3 and they miss it. And then the Aces are going down the other way. In transition, Yvonne gets cross-matched onto Hamby and she's just like getting pushed around in the post. And then she's able to actually get her hand up in the passing lane and deflect the ball. And then it's going the other way. So not as impactful as the Sun would have wanted her to be in game 1. Like that was just like a world-class sequence from her. So, we'll always have that highlight.
I think we had some Yvonne Anderson highlights against Dallas last week too. So this is not like Yvonne Anderson slander by any means. It's just, hey, Jaz Thomas was the starting point guard for a reason. And I gotta say, just on the whole, I was expecting to feel Jaz's absence more in these 2 games than I did. Because, we talked about this at length last year and even last week when we teased this as our games of the week. The Sun had the Aces number last year. Like they lost in the playoffs in 2020, but that was, an affront to basketball, really, that 5-game series. It was horrific to watch. And a lot of the players from both sides are not there anymore. But last year during the regular season, like this Sun team just completely obliterated the Aces in 3 meetings. And for a few years now, anytime that Chelsea Gray has been matched up with Jaz Thomas, Jaz has specifically had her number. And yes, you can credit Connecticut's team defense, but a lot of it is Jaz just doing her work one-on-one and making things difficult for Chelsea. So I thought that we would see a lot more of that absence, that Chelsea would be able to dominate more offensively. And like, while that was definitely at play, like Chelsea was obviously more offensively efficient in these 2 games than she has been in the past. Like her going 4 of 7 for 8 points in that second game, like that's the kind of line we would have talked about in 2020. Like it's not something that you would write home about for Chelsea Gray. Where I really noticed the Connecticut defensive difference from this year and last wasn't so much that Jaz wasn't there, it's that Briann January wasn't there. And like whoever was guarding Kelsey Plum, which often was Natisha Heidemann, they had just a horrific time about it. Like Kelsey Plum just blowing by Tisha on a number of occasions. And I'm sure Yvonne Anderson was subject to that on 1 or 2 occasions. But I did think it was interesting that like I would have thought DeJounette Carrington would get a little bit more time just because she has the size to theoretically contend with Chelsea Gray. Like I think they're both 6 feet tall. There was one moment in the second game where Chelsea posted her up in the second quarter and it was like DeJounte wasn't even there. And yeah, I mean, I guess when you get Chelsea guarding that deep of post position, like what is any post defender supposed to do? But I do wonder if Curt Miller's ever going to trust Carrington more, because like all of those Yvonne Anderson minutes from game one, they basically all went to Courtney Williams in game two. And it wasn't because she was playing particularly outstanding defense. It was because, she was hitting her jump shots. So they had to guard her, or at least, she was making an impact on that end. So that Briann January absence is actually kind of more interesting to me, like from a defensive standpoint, than the Jaz one, which not to say that Jaz isn't an awesome defender. I noticed it more on like the secondary side than on Chelsea Gray.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Because when you have a point of attack defender as dangerous as Jaz, you can look past the, I don't want to say like lack of offensive production, because she did produce, lack of scoring burst, I guess, let's say, or offensive explosiveness. But it was always Jaz in January. And when you have two perimeter oriented scorers at any given time, right, which not many teams do, but specifically this Aces team, you have three perimeter options in Young, Gray, and Plum. And when you have, I don't want to say no defensive stoppers, because, certainly the scheme is good enough for the Sun to be able to make some stuff happen. I mean, Chelsea Gray, for as timely as her shots were, she still went 5 of 13 for 13 points in that first game. So, the team scheme did it. Not enough, obviously, to win. But there's just a lack of like, we just have, your margin of error goes down, I think is what it is. You don't have one person you could just say like, this is your matchup. We go as your matchup goes. If Plum is going off, then we're going to lose this game, but we can trust you to handle as much as you can handle. And, Kelsey Plum, if you want to get into Kelsey Plum, she had a couple of buckets.
My gosh.
Yeah.
You saw the video of her talking about meeting Tom Brady, yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, that was the second game, that was the first game, right? The Tuesday game.
I don't even know if it was that game or the Sky game, but like Asia's disgust at Kelsey's reaction is probably the funniest thing I've watched in months.
Yeah, I think it was. It was the Tuesday
first
game.
Connecticut game. Yeah,
because
right.
It was at Vegas. Yeah, that was. Yeah, if I can get that video, I'll put it right here.
KB, tell them what you did to Tom Brady. She had the ultimate opportunity to speak to one of the best.
Tom Brady is my favorite athlete, and they told me they came before the game and said, "Listen, Tom Brady's coming to the game," and I was like, "Shut up!" Like, no, he's not. And they were like, "No, he's coming. He's sitting on Gucci Row," and I was like, "Say less, say less. I'm gonna give him something to remember from this game." And I remember we played the first half and I walked out and I was just like, don't say anything. And then I locked eyes with him and I was like, screw it. I went right up to him. I dapped him up, gave him a big hug. I was like, man, you're a dog. I love you. And he looked at me and he was like, yeah. So we connected.
By barking. This woman just barked at Tom Brady.
He's not gonna forget that. He's not. And when I had that step back, I looked at him and I was like, yeah.
He should have barked.
Plum just, I mean, it's not fair to say, because I think Tish like did as good a job as possible, but like there was this one basket in the fourth quarter that was just like so disrespectful. It was Asia at the top of the key handling Chelsea, faking a screen for Plum lifting out of the corner, and then it was basically a handoff. And so Tish is fighting over. Kelsey takes one dribble, stops on the right slot, pulls it back, and splashes it. And Connecticut has to call a timeout. And you can just see Chelsea just like jumping up and down, like celebrating. Plum is just like cold-blooded. She like stares at the Sun bench as she's walking back to her own.
Did she bark at them?
It was cold. It was, yeah. And I think, was Tom Brady sitting close to the Sun bench? Because I think maybe that's where she was looking.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. the problem is like when you're trying to defend her is that her footwork is so good. So like if you try to take away the step back, then she just immediately just bursts by you. But she can get to that step back pretty much anytime she wants. And it's so clean. I just, I'm at a loss as to what the good options are to contain Kelsey Plum at this point, because she's not a heater. Like she's making basically everything she's taking. And because of all the space in that Vegas offense, like the lane is open for her all the time. I mean, like you said, Tisha Heidemann, it's not like she was putting in a bad effort defensively. Admittedly, she's a little bit smaller than Jaz Thomas, but I mean, Kelsey Plum is not that big either. But she was shooting over Natisha like there was no defender in front of her. That's just the level of confidence that she has in her game right now. And then you factor in the problem that Kelsey is supremely well conditioned, so she doesn't wear down as the game goes on. And the only way that Vegas could even stop her in the fourth quarter was when that Connecticut could stop her was when Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray were both forced out of the game with injuries. And so they just threw the kitchen sink at her defensively. And like, yeah, if you put 3 bodies on her and blitz her, then maybe that's the way you can contain Kelsey Plum. But that's just not a feasible option when A'ja Wilson, Jackie Young, and Chelsea Gray are all on the floor at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, Connecticut did some occasional blitzing. Middle of third, early offense. Plum is bringing the ball down, and it's Courtney Williams guarding her, and then Plaisance sets a drag. AT just decides, like, yeah, we're doing this. So she goes full speed ahead at her, and Plum picks the ball up. It's by the side of her head, and she's trying to make a pass, which is as difficult an angle as you could try to make a pass from. And then AT is able to steal the ball and go down the floor. But yeah, I mean, you know, there were little things here and there that were encouraging for the Sun. And it feels strange that I'm talking about the first game like it was like a 20-point blowout. It was an 8-point win. And yeah, you know, the final margin isn't always indicative of the level of competitiveness in the game,
Right.
but the Sun never went away. And I think that was big going into game 2.
Yeah, I think it was just that big run in the third quarter that sort of made it feel like the game was out of hand. Like Vegas had found their zone and Connecticut wasn't going to get back into it. But again, I just maintain that this is a good matchup for Connecticut. Like with or without Jaz Thomas, they just seem to find ways to frustrate the Vegas front court at the very least. The problem now is that their perimeter scoring power is supercharged, you know, with Kelsey Plum in the starting lineup and Jackie Young playing the way Jackie Young does. Like just the very first possession of, I think actually it was the second possession of the second game, like the ball just comes to Jackie Young on the wing in her shooting pocket. And that's the kind of possession a year ago where she would still drive or dribble into a pull-up jumper. But no, she's just shot ready immediately, taking that 3, canning it. And like, I don't know why I keep thinking about her contract, because like it's not my money, but I just keep wondering, had she not signed that extension this offseason, like someone was going to max her this offseason. How do you not watch this version of Jackie Young and think that she is worth like anything less than a maximum contract? But whatever, that's really not the point here. The point is that like I just love watching these two teams play against one another, and I just hope that we get a playoff series that is watchable, unlike that 2020 version when everybody was hurt and it was a lot of Angel McCautry like running off of double screens that were set like 3 feet away from the basket.
In fairness, that was peak spacing at the time for Bill. Yeah, just a quick thing about Jackie, which I mean, Notre Dame shouts. They had this one, I wouldn't necessarily call it a feature, but it was a side-by-side in the first game of her shot form in her rookie season and her shot form today. Pretty obvious like what the change was. It was, you know, it's a shift from like basically her shot form is like shooting hand is tilted slightly this way. Might be reversed for the people, but this is my right hand. It ended up looking like this, and you know the conventional is more like that. That was dumb. I don't know why I did that, but I'll have the picture up over me talking, so you don't have to see all of that. But yeah, the shot form, just the work she's put in over time, not just her conditioning, not just her physicality, everything. Take it from me, who's like coached high school basketball and tried to fix shot form over time. The level of patience and dedication you have to not revert back to your old terrible habits is like, it takes so much discipline, and like all the credit to Jackie.
Was there anything else you wanted to say about the first game, Evan?
Jonquel defensively, not to say that blocks are everything, but the blocks she had in that game were pretty spectacular. There was one on Jackie that was great. Actually, I think she got all of the guards. She got Jackie, she got Plum, and she got Chelsea. The last one was the most spectacular, I think. But just wanted to talk about that a little bit later. I'll talk about some sets that the Aces ran because I've been talking a lot about their zone and stuff, but Becky runs some really cool stuff. So I'll hold off.
I'm glad you ended with Jonquel because I think that was sort of the biggest change from game 1 into game 2. So I didn't get to watch game 1 live because I was at the Sparks game that night, but a lot of the talk was, why hasn't Jonquel been like aggressive enough offensively? Like, how does your MVP only get 4 shots up in one game? Yada, yada, yada. And you could tell immediately at the start of game 2, there was an emphasis on getting Jonquel touches at the very least, even if she wasn't getting shot attempts. So she finishes the game with 9 shot attempts, which like is not anything to write home about again. But the fact is that the ball is going into her every single time. So like she gets a touch in the post, she draws 2 defenders, kicks it out. That's a 3 for DB or Courtney Williams, right? She, gets another touch in the post. They only have 1 defender on her. That's fadeaway over Aisha Wilson, right? More and more times, like anytime that she's getting the ball, and they're getting her in good spots, like it's pretty much right on the elbow. So it's not like she's too far away to the point where she can't make that skip. What I love about Jonquel's passes is they all have the curve that her jumper does, but yeah, that's neither here nor there. But they were just getting her into really good spots where she could see the whole floor and still like be in that position of where she could score, she could pass, or just make another move. Most of the time she wasn't really like trying to face up on the Vegas defense, which I think is the right idea, but just keeping them off balance by like finding the open player whenever the double came. And then she was really useful against the zone because they station her in the middle of the free throw line, at that nail position. And then like once she's there, that's like you were mentioning with Candace Parker earlier, that's the worst kind of player you want in the middle of the zone because that's easy jumper. Again, she can see the entire court. So the pass is available to any of the shooters. And then from that position, that's very much easy drive to the basket, especially if, you're working with Kia Stokes and Teresa Blazance on the back line of the zone. So I just thought that the way they involved Jonquel offensively, even if you don't see it in the shot attempts specifically, like granted 9 is still much better than 4. She was involved in every single action. Like she's setting screens for Courtney Williams to free her earlier in the game. Her just passing out of the top of the key, whether that was against a zone or against a set defense, like maybe it doesn't create the shot itself, but like there were a lot of hockey assists involved. You just could tell that like, okay, this is the MVP. She obviously is unhappy about the way things went down in the first game and is committed to making an impact right away. The only issue I'd have with Jonquel's performance is that she got just like super like stupid touch fouls at the end of the game and like was invisible in the fourth quarter. But offensively, I thought it was a really noticeable shift. And then defensively, like Aisha Wilson cannot take Jonquel Jones one-on-one. Aisha Wilson, I think, can probably take just about any player in the league one-on-one. Like even watching her go at Stewie, I think has been one of the most impressive things about her career to date. But she had a really hard time finishing over Jonquel. And Jonquel is obviously very tall. She's 6'6". Just the drives to the bucket, like just a little off. I think she only really felt comfortable taking the jumper over Jonquel when Jonquel was like coming to close out, not when she was directly like guarding her. And you could see the difference, like when she got to go up against AT, it was, directly to the basket. Cause I mean, we talked about the Alyssa Thomas verticality thing last week, but it's just a different level of size when you're finishing over Alyssa Thomas versus Jonquel Jones. And then even when Aisha Wilson had the opportunity to like go up against Bri Jones, like that was a different level of success for her than against JJ. I will say that some Aisha Wilson's shots just look like she didn't have the touch, on Thursday. I don't expect her to have a shooting line of 5 of 16 on a regular basis. Like some of them were just, she gets all the way to the hoop and it just sort of rims out, or even a mid-ranger that's like right in that 12-foot little like diagonal jumper kind of situation that Aisha Wilson cans in her sleep just wasn't quite working. So I'm not going to give all of the credit to the Connecticut defense, but like it definitely got her uncomfortable enough to the point where she was kind of rushing even her easier shots by the end of the game. And a lot of that was just like, this is some of the best one-on-one defense I've seen anybody play against Aisha Wilson in a very long time.
To what you were saying, Jonquel in that first game against the zone, whether it was Asia Wilson or Kia Stokes, whoever was that middle defender, they were trying to get her to seal there and, for the guards to throw that entry pass or maybe that high-low. And they had Alyssa Thomas as the nail, as the middle of the zone, which functionally it makes sense, right? But it's kind of what Vegas wanted in that first game is
Right.
you're sort of working her out of the offense. And
just one quick thing, like I kind of like force feeding Jonquel sometimes because Alyssa Thomas is going to make herself involved. Like she does not get on the court and not find a way to impact possessions. That's just the way she is. Jonquel, just by virtue of her demeanor, I think needs a little bit more prodding. I don't know, almost sometimes like she's not as naturally aggressive, I think, as AT. So I like putting her in positions where she has to be at the hub of things,
Yeah, I agree. I think part of that is to what I was saying earlier. It's not necessarily that she, wasn't looking for her own shot because, like I said, she was making the right play. She was always making the right play. But that's the issue sometimes when you're the reigning MVP. Like sometimes you just got to get shots.
Yeah, that's why I like that she took 4 threes in this second game. 6 threes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But I mean, the other thing I wanted to talk about was Asia in that second quarter where I think, it was you and I was talking to Em about this where, I said, are the Aces really going to come all the way back in the second quarter? Like not even the Sun might not even take a lead into halftime in that second game. I think Asia went 4 for 6 on attempts in the second quarter. I might be wrong about that, but a lot of her makes came in that second quarter when, she kind of, she wasn't just out there getting cardio. She got her second wind. Yeah, I think, Jonquel is just a really tough matchup and it's not necessarily length that gives her pause. It's the very specific length that Jonquel has, where Jonquel is excellent at moving backwards and then extending straight up, which is a great way for her to get contests. And then that wingspan comes into play versus the other two front court players or the main front court players of Alyssa Thomas. Like we talked about the verticality and like Bri Jones, she's a lot more physically imposing than Jonquel. But Asia presents like a mismatch for just about everybody. And, she still found a way to attack Jonquel. It's just that, sometimes the shots don't fall. And I'm not necessarily saying that like Jonquel is the answer to stopping Asia Wilson in a one-on-one setting because she's too good. She's going to figure stuff out. But yeah, I mean, she did enough to cause enough problems in this matchup.
Yeah, I don't want to like be down on Asia Wilson. Obviously, like she's phenomenal and defensively had some just tremendous possessions in this game. 2 blocks, I want to say, one in the third quarter that just immediately leads to a Kelsey Plum 3. And then another one in the fourth quarter that got to a Dearica Hamby 3 that sort of like was the last time that I think Vegas really threatened, Connecticut. They were sort of like within single digits the whole time, but like never within one possession with the ball. Speaking of that, like just the game score situation, Vegas got to within 1 several times against Connecticut in that second half, but they could never score to take the lead. They get to within 1 with 1:56 left in the third quarter. And then Becky Hammond puts in a lineup that does not have Chelsea Gray or Asia Wilson in it. And I understand your best players need rest every now and then, but like, I just hated at that moment, like not knowing that obviously Vegas is not going to be able to overtake Connecticut at any point from then on out over the last 12 minutes. But like when you have the opportunity to just go for the kill, like you have like scaled this 19-point lead, you're within 1, to just come out with like Kia Stokes and Teresa Plaisance and Dearica Hamby front court. I really didn't like it. They don't score for the rest of the third quarter. And I'm not saying that that's like directly because of that lineup, but maybe. So there's a lot of things I like. Obviously the Becky Hammond does. And the general watchability of the Aces, I think is a great testament to what she's brought to this team. But I didn't like that decision at all. It felt very Popovich-y, honestly, just to get all the bench guys in. So it was just a moment that stood out to me.
Yeah, and I think the biggest difference in that game versus the first game is that when they threw out these lineups where Stokes and actually we might be talking about 2 different sets of things, but like I think the biggest thing is that she was going up against now Kurt Miller, who completely shortened his rotation.
Exactly.
In the previous game, you could buy those minutes a little more, but I mean, not in this game. If
No.
I think she might have done that in the first game. It's not necessarily something I noticed, but yeah. So
Again, easier to steal those minutes with Yvonne Anderson on the floor, but it is what it is.
sorry, Yvonne. Okay.
Couple other things that stood out to me in this game. We mentioned Vegas being comfortable with letting Courtney Williams beat them. The number of times they went under on screen and rolls with Courtney Williams just drove me nuts, because I don't particularly think of Courtney Williams as someone who's going to like beat you on her way to the basket. She wants to settle into the jumper. So the fact that they kept letting her just walk into those pull-ups made me very upset. They finally start going over like third and fourth quarter. Courtney does actually a great job. She sees Kelsey Plum going over on one screen in the third quarter and just rejects it and then gets all the way to the cup, which I thought was a really interesting counter. But you notice in the fourth quarter that, you know, the water kind of turned off for Courtney Williams. And I'm not going to say it was exclusively because Vegas was going over on screens, but like, I definitely think it was a worthwhile defensive adjustment. Another thing that I particularly liked was Bri Jones's motor on the offensive glass. At some point, maybe I'll stop talking about Bri Jones, but this is not the episode. There's one play where she's at the elbow. She takes a jumper. There are two aces underneath the basket, including A'ja Wilson, who are fighting themselves for a defensive rebound. Bri just swoops in after the missed jumper, takes it away from A'ja. Her activity on the offensive glass, Connecticut's activity as a whole on the offensive glass is really impressive, but her activity in particular, her and DeJounette has actually been really good on the offensive glass. I just find it very enjoyable to watch. And yeah, more DeJounette time is always appreciated. I don't know that it's always like working out great yet, but I do think it's a worthwhile investment. And I tweeted this yesterday. I would like to see more Aisha Sheppard and Kirsten Bell, because I just think that Vegas is going to need another wing body at some point. And I would hope that they've invested some time into their rookies just so that they're not like completely, you know, shell shocked when they go into a high leverage game later in the season. So that's my mild plea to Becky Hammon, is like, play the rookies just a little. Like, you're creaming everyone. You can afford to kill some minutes with these rookies.
Yeah, and I think that's, well, not the rookie point, the rebounding point, and actually the Bri Jones point is a fascinating one. What I didn't see anybody really talk about is the fact that no defensive rebounds, but you know, four offensive rebounds.
Rebounds.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest battleground.
Connecticut philosophy is not getting defensive rebounds.
Yeah, yeah. The Sun are, last I checked, 11th. Second to last in defensive rebounding, but number one in offensive rebounding. And yeah, in the win, it was 8-6 in terms of second chance points for Connecticut, which isn't a big margin. But the Aces, I think 14, they won 14-12 in second chance points. But the Aces are also number one in defensive rebounding. So, you know, it was like a particular battleground that the Aces were winning, and they made it very, very close in both games in terms of that.
Just one more thing. I kind of have a question for you. So Alyssa Thomas has zero shooting gravity, right? And I mentioned last week how I don't particularly like her being the pick and roll operator, but I do really like when like Natisha runs a pick and roll and then she swings it to AT, who has a better angle for the pass into the roller. Was that the thing you called the Gator pass? I can't remember actually, but just
yes.
How do you deal with that as a defense where like you don't want to come out high on Alyssa because she will like try to get into the lane to that floater, but at the same time, like you're just giving her these wide open passing angles too, which I almost feel like is what she wants.
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, I mean, it depends. Like a team like Vegas specifically, like they switched up where they sent their help from, obviously, because, you know, that's the smartest thing to do. But normally, if you're going to take away a Gator pass, which, you know, if you haven't seen the first episode, it's like Sabreena said, it's typically on a pick and roll where the defense is either hedging or blitzing. You get the ball out of the ball handler's hands into a player who wasn't previously involved to somebody like, you know, at the slot or whatever, and then they can make the pass to the roller. Called a Gator pass because the University of Florida Gators with Al Horford and Billy Donovan, that's where they did that. But I don't necessarily think it's not something you can really take away depending on, you know, where your help is coming from. Yeah. But if you're setting that screen, I think the one I specifically remember is like Hamby made it as tough as humanly possible. Like I think AT was well beyond the 3-point line when she has to throw the pass, and it's such a quick pass. I think if it had come just a half second later, Jackie would have been right there. But I mean, AT is able to throw it right into where only Jonquel can catch it. And Chelsea Gray was like rotating over right there too. So if she had made a pass out of that, like you would have been dead. But I mean, I guess you just live with those plays.
Yeah, I was just curious because like that's where I like Alyssa Thomas best, is making the secondary creative pass, and she's just really good at it. So I was curious in your infinite coaching wisdom if there was a way around that. But I mean, that's why Connecticut is tough to stop, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, you take one thing away and it's just another, and it just flows and flows and flows and flows. So, I guess, I mean, do you have anything else from the second game?
No, just that on the very last possession, I forget who had the ball, but there was about a 1.4 second differential between the shot clock and the game clock, and the referees just let it expire without calling a shot clock violation and giving the ball to the opposing team. So I was very grateful for that. It was just a nice way of ending things because there was no need to run that extra 1.4 seconds.
Yeah, you love to see it.
One more thing, Bri Jones, in the fourth quarter, there was a moment where she deflects the ball out of bounds and is presumably calling for it to be her possession, even though she's the one who deflected out of bounds, because professional athletes are pathological liars, but she points the wrong direction. And AT just sort of looks at her and she just like starts cracking up. It's great.
I am excited to watch that back. I must have missed that. But you had a step through in your game.
Yes. Jackie Young. I don't know that we've had her as a step through candidate before, but really nice play at the end of the first quarter with about 30 seconds left, gets into the lane, help comes, and she just gets by him with a little extra step. Probably like the only good moment for Vegas in that first quarter when they surrendered 37 points, but that was a nice one. Bonner had a step through later. I honestly can't remember if she actually made the shot or not, because Bonner, as we know, loves the step through. It's her go-to footwork, but it is a more frequent part of her game and not as efficient, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the reason we haven't talked about a Jackie step through is because her step throughs are always so violent, and she's able to draw contact like right away. That's what DEWANNA did too. But in my game, she had one in the fourth end of shot clock. She's able to, it might have been on Jackie, pump fake, step through with her right foot, which is, it's a right-handed shooter. Like it's weird to go off of your right foot like that. Right. She's able to step through, splashes it. Yeah, so those are, the step throughs.
It is a mandatory portion of this podcast. So, it just has to be her. Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things I did want to definitely do, like I said earlier, is just a quick look at sets. There are a lot of things that the aces do, ram action specifically, which is when you set a screen and then that player goes to set a ball screen then after, which is especially dangerous when it's like Plums or Gray setting a screen for A'ja Wilson and then she goes to set the ball screen. As a defender, you're just in trouble. But the one I wanted to start off with is the very first play of game 2, the most Popovich-y set of all. Right off of tip-off, Jackie comes off of this Plum. It's not really a screen. It's kind of a brush. And then Plum receives 2 screens going to the opposite corner while Jackie turns baseline. And then, it's hammer action. That's what that is. And then Plum is able to get a catch and shoot 3 in the corner. She doesn't hit it, but like hammer. The other one is Em Adler asked me this. Shout out to Mo. I'll have the link to his Twitter here. He identified the pieces correctly. So the winner set is this sideline out of bounds set where there are 2 players underneath on both blocks, and then the player on the strong side where the ball is being inbounded gets a screen to go away, a cross screen to go to the opposite side. The inbounder throws that pass, and it's kind of an impressive set. And then the player standing at the slot sets a screen for a shooter to come off of them to receive the ball. It is called Winner. I believe it's credited to Brad Stevens from his time in Butler. Yeah, just a cool set. It's a way to, I don't want to throw Plaisance under the bus because she was great with the Mystics. She threw a great pass, but the personnel was not ideal for this final play.
4 bigs is tough. It's tough.
Yeah. One of the bigs is.
Correct me if I'm wrong. There was a big instance of winner in that Phoenix Seattle series in 2018, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sandy Brondello. I talk about this moment all the time. Sandy Brondello draws it up, and we're in the huddle because that's the coolest thing about the
beauty
W.
of WNBA broadcast. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Mhm.
And the only other thing that I really want to talk about are some horns. Shout out to the Dallas Wings. Horns. And the LA Sparks, apparently.
And the LA Sparks.
So, I mean, you'll see this all over the league, flex action, this horns flex against the Sun, where the reason it's made dangerous is because Stokes is relatively unimportant in this set. She is where the ball is entered through. And then the flex action happens, which is what Plaisance comes off of and the screen that Plum sets. The reason it's dangerous is because when you start ghosting this action, the defense is already a step behind. And Plum is so well conditioned, so fast and so lethal that she can sprint into this handoff. And now you have a 2-person game between Kelsey Plum and A'ja Wilson. And
good luck.
Yeah, in this one, Courtney Williams ends up like jumping at shadows, trying to catch Plum. Plum misses this, but like, welcome to hell is pretty much what it is. And the last one I want to highlight is it's one against the Dream, but you'll see it a lot. So it's a horn setup, and I mean, I'm going to call it horns clear. If I come up with a different name for it, I'll link to it, the description, or somebody corrects me, I'll link to the description. But the ball is entered to A'ja Wilson, and then Kelsey Plum goes in the direction that she just threw the ball into. The players are in the corners, so maximum spacing. And then the big on the opposite side of A'ja just cuts right down and through. So you have a choice. You can either take the pass away to the big who's going to end up right under the basket, and A'ja Wilson is a terrific passer at this point, or you can leave A'ja Wilson to drive to her strong hand and get a layup. So as I said previously, welcome to hell. Like, these are the things that Becky Hammon and her personnel does to opposing teams. Yeah. Just wanted to highlight those things.
Yeah. I mean, usually we end the episodes by talking about what we're looking forward to. I guess just more of Vegas figuring out how to exploit, all of the immense talent at their disposal. I just hope that Jackie Young is healthy enough to, play in their next game. We've got a fun Sunday coming up with every WNBA team in action, but my gut says that Jackie's probably going to miss 1 or 2 here. Hopefully Courtney Williams is able to come back soon to help Vegas mitigate that absence. But just incredibly on brand. The game that I'm looking forward to is Sun Storm. 2 teams that I just love watching, and we'll watch more of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to a bunch of stuff, but yeah, I'm excited for a Sunday slate full of games. Weird that Saturday has no games, but whatever. Kathy.
I also really have to watch the Mystics more at this point because they're doing so many things that I enjoy watching in highlights, but I haven't consistently seen them play, and I'm clearly missing out.
If you watch the Sparks for work, and I mean, I don't know if personal enjoyment factors in at all. You don't have to answer, but you're gonna love watching the Mystics. You are. So that's what I'm looking forward to. You letting me know how a Mystics game went for you.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we'll see you next week. Bye.